Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. It started like any other Tinder conversation. A witty opening line, a shared interest in obscure films, and a surprising amount of shared cultural touchstones. His name was Liam. His profile picture was him hiking in what looked like the Scottish Highlands, and his bio said he was looking for someone to explore the weird and wonderful with. I was cautiously optimistic. I've been on Tinder long enough to know that the hiking photo usually meant they were looking for someone to witness their outdoorsy lifestyle. And the weird and wonderful line was often code for wanting a no-strings-attached hookup. But Liam seemed different. He actually engaged with my profile, asked about my work as a freelance writer, and even complimented my, admittedly nerdy, collection of vintage records I'd subtly featured in one of my pictures. We messaged back and forth for a couple of days, the conversation flowing effortlessly. He wasn't overly complimentary or pushy, just genuinely interested. He had a dry, self-deprecating sense of humor that I found incredibly charming. He was witty, but not in a try-hard way. We talked about our favorite books, our worst travel experiences, and even our deepest fears. It was the kind of conversation you usually only have with close friends, not someone you met on a dating app. I was starting to feel like I'd actually stumbled upon a rare gem in the sea of generic profiles and predictable pickup lines. He was also very private. He didn't give me much to work with. I didn't know where he worked, and he avoided the topic when I asked. I did notice that he liked to change the topic. It was weird because our conversation was so natural. Then he suggested we meet up. There's this quirky little bookstore downtown, he wrote. They have a poetry slam on Friday nights. Thought you might enjoy it. I did enjoy it. Poetry slams were my jam. And the fact that he suggested something other than drinks or dinner was a definite plus. I agreed, feeling a flutter of excitement I hadn't felt in a long time. I gave him my number, and we confirmed the plans for Friday. As the week went on, we continued to text. The conversations got deeper, more personal. He told me about his struggles with anxiety, his passion for photography, and his dreams of one day opening his own art gallery. I shared my insecurities about my writing, my fear of commitment, and my secret desire to learn how to play the ukulele. We were opening up to each other in a way that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Friday finally arrived, and I spent hours agonizing over what to wear. I wanted to look effortlessly cool, but also approachable. I settled on a vintage dress, a leather jacket, and a pair of Doc Martens. I even put on lipstick, which I almost never do. I arrived at the bookstore a few minutes early, feeling a mix of anticipation and nervousness. I scanned the crowd, looking for Liam. I knew what he looked like from his profile picture, but I still felt a pang of uncertainty. What if he wasn't who he said he was? What if he was a catfish? What if we didn't have the same chemistry in person? I spotted him, standing near the poetry slam stage. He was taller than I expected, with dark hair and piercing blue eyes. He was wearing a simple black t-shirt and jeans, but he somehow managed to look effortlessly stylish. He saw me, smiled, and walked over. "Hey," he said, his voice even deeper and more captivating in person. "You made it." "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, feeling my cheeks flush. We hugged, and I immediately felt a spark, a connection that went beyond the words we had exchanged online. The poetry slam was okay. I don't remember. We sat next to each other, occasionally whispering comments about the performers. The whole night I was uncomfortable, though. He kept staring at me. It wasn't a normal stare, either. It was like he was trying to see right through me. I was just really uncomfy. The feeling was like when you're on stage, and there is nobody in the crowd. It feels like nobody is there at all. It was bizarre. After the slam, we walked around the city for a while, talking about everything and nothing. The conversation flowed just as easily as it had online. We laughed, we debated, we shared stories. I was starting to feel like I had known him my whole life. As the night wore on, the city grew quieter, and the streets emptied out. We found ourselves standing in front of my apartment building. "I had a really great time tonight," I said, feeling a wave of shyness wash over me. "Me too," he replied, his eyes locking with mine. "We should do it again sometime." "Definitely," I said, smiling. He leaned in, and I closed my eyes, anticipation building. But then, something strange happened. Just as our lips were about to touch, he pulled back. "Wait," he said, his voice suddenly tense. "There's something I need to tell you." I opened my eyes, confused. "What is it?" I asked, my heart starting to pound. He took a deep breath. "I'm not who you think I am," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I haven't been entirely honest with you." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. He hesitated for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn photograph. He handed it to me. "This is me," he said. I looked at the photograph. It was a picture of a young man, maybe in his early 20s, with the same dark hair and blue eyes as Liam. But something was off. The man in the photo looked haunted, and there was something else, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. The man in the photo looked familiar. "I don't understand," I said, my voice shaking. "This looks like you." "It is me," he said, "but it's not me now." He took another deep breath. "My name isn't Liam," he said. "My real name is, and this is not my actual photo. Do you know what I do?" I shook my head, feeling a wave of dizziness wash over me. I'm not alive," he said, his voice barely audible. I stared at him, my mind reeling. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice filled with disbelief. "I'm dead," he said, his eyes filled with sadness. "I died 5 years ago in a car accident. I'm a ghost. Now I have to disappear forever." He reached out and touched my cheek, his hand ice cold. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I just wanted to feel something again." And then he was gone. Just like that. Vanished into thin air. I stood there, in front of my apartment building, staring at the empty space where he had been standing just moments before. I was alone, cold, and utterly terrified. I didn't know what to believe. Had I imagined the whole thing? Was I going crazy? I ran inside, locked the door, and collapsed onto my bed, sobbing. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up, replaying the events of the evening in my head, trying to make sense of what had happened. The next morning, I woke up feeling exhausted and confused. I decided to do some research. I searched the internet for news articles about car accidents in the area. After hours of searching, I finally found something. An article about a young man who had died in a car accident 5 years ago. His name wasn't Liam, but it was definitely the man that was in the picture he showed me. I stared at the article, feeling a chill run down my spine. It was real. He was real. And he was dead. I closed my laptop, feeling a sense of dread wash over me. I didn't know what to do. Should I tell someone? Would anyone believe me? I decided to keep it to myself. I couldn't risk being labeled as crazy. But from that day on, my life was never the same. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I saw shadows in the corner of my eye, heard whispers in the dark. I started having nightmares, vivid dreams about Liam, about the car accident, about death. I became paranoid, isolated. I stopped using Tinder, stopped going out, stopped trusting people. I was haunted, not by a ghost, but by the memory of a ghost. The experience changed me. It made me question everything I thought I knew about reality, about life, about death. It made me realize that there are things in this world that we can't explain, things that defy logic and reason. And sometimes, the most terrifying things are the things that are real. I never felt unsafe on Tinder until that moment when I realized Mark knew things he shouldn't. It was a slow burn, not a sudden realization. I'd been on the app for a solid year, going through the usual motions, swiping, matching, chatting, occasionally meeting up for a drink or coffee that rarely led to anything more. I'd met some interesting people, some dull people, and a few who were just plain weird, but none who ever made me question my safety. I was pretty careful, or so I thought. I used a fake first name, kept my bio vague, and always met in public places. I even did the whole send a friend my location thing on first dates. Mark seemed normal. Maybe that was the problem. His profile was generic. A couple of smiling pictures, one of him hiking, another with a dog that wasn't his, I later learned. His bio said something about loving the outdoors and trying new restaurants. Basic Tinder guy stuff. We matched, exchanged a few messages about our favorite hiking trails, and decided to meet for a beer at a brewery downtown. The date was fine. He was a little awkward, but nice enough. We talked about our jobs, our hobbies, and our families. Nothing out of the ordinary. I wasn't blown away, but I wasn't turned off either. We ended the night with a polite hug, and maybe we can do this again sometime. The second date was similar. We went to a different brewery, talked some more, and this time, he walked me back to my apartment. We kissed goodnight, and I went inside, feeling neutral. He texted me later, saying he had a good time, and I replied that I did too. We made plans for a third date. That's when things started to get a little off. During our third date, Mark mentioned something about my job that I hadn't told him. I work as a freelance graphic designer, and I had mentioned in passing that I was working on a project for a local bookstore. But he specifically said, "Oh, the redesign of their website. That's a big project, isn't it?" I was immediately confused. I hadn't told him about the website redesign. All I had said was that I was working on a project for a bookstore. "How did you know it was a website redesign?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. He shrugged. "You might have mentioned it," he said, smiling. "Or maybe I just guessed." I didn't think I had mentioned it, and it seemed like a weird thing to guess. But I let it go. Maybe he was just really good at reading people. But then it happened again. A few days later, we were texting, and he mentioned my cat Oliver. I had a picture of Oliver on my Instagram, but my Instagram handle wasn't linked to my Tinder profile, and I hadn't shown Mark any pictures of him. "Oliver's a cute cat," he texted. "How old is he now, like 6? I froze. I definitely hadn't told him my cat's name or age. "How did you know his name was Oliver?" I texted back, my fingers trembling slightly. He didn't reply for a while. Then he wrote, "I think I saw you walking him the other day. He's a pretty distinctive cat." I didn't buy it. I never walked Oliver outside. He was an indoor cat. And even if I did, Mark didn't live anywhere near my apartment. From that point on, I was on high alert. I started paying closer attention to what I said to Mark and what I posted online. I scoured his social media profiles, trying to find some clue as to how he knew these things. But his profiles were all locked down, with very little information. The next red flag came during a phone call. We were talking about our favorite movies, and I mentioned a small, independent film that I loved. It wasn't a well-known movie, and I had only seen it once, at a film festival a few years ago. "Oh, The Lighthouse Keeper's Daughter," he said. "That's a great film. I heard it was filmed near your hometown, isn't it?" My blood ran cold. I had never told Mark where I grew up. I hadn't even mentioned it in passing. My hometown was a small, insignificant town that no one had ever heard of. There was no way he could have known that unless he had done some serious digging. "How did you know that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then he said, "I don't know. I must have read it somewhere." That was it. I couldn't pretend anymore. I knew something was seriously wrong. I hung up the phone, my heart pounding in my chest. I started researching Mark online, digging deeper than I had before. I used reverse image searches on his profile pictures. I searched his name. I tried everything I could think of. And that's when I found it. A small, obscure forum dedicated to online stalking. And there, buried deep within a thread, was a post about me. It included my real name, my address, my job, my social media profiles, and even pictures of my apartment building. The post was written by someone with the username Nidal77, and it detailed everything about my life, including information I had never shared online. I scrolled through the thread, my hand shaking, and found another post from Nidal77. It was a screenshot of my Tinder profile with the caption, "I've finally made contact. The game begins." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I knew, with absolute certainty, that Nidal77 was Mark. That was the moment I never felt unsafe until. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just dealing with a weird guy from Tinder. I was dealing with a stalker, someone who had been meticulously researching me, manipulating me, and inserting himself into my life. I immediately blocked Mark on Tinder, on my phone, and on all my social media accounts. I called the police and reported him, but they said there wasn't much they could do without concrete evidence of a crime. They advised me to be careful and to document any further interactions. I spent the next few weeks living in a state of constant fear. I changed my locks, installed a security system, and started carrying pepper spray. I avoided going out alone, and I always made sure to let someone know where I was going. Mark never contacted me directly again, but I knew he was still watching. I would see him in places I frequented, always at a distance, always just out of reach. He would drive past my apartment building slowly, staring up at my window. He would accidentally bump into me at the grocery store, offering a creepy smile before quickly disappearing. I eventually moved to a different city, changed my name, and started a new life. I still think about Mark sometimes, and I still get that feeling of unease whenever I meet someone new. But I'm slowly learning to trust again. The experience taught me a valuable lesson, that danger can come from anywhere, even from the most seemingly harmless places, and that sometimes the person you think you know is actually someone else entirely. The internet makes it easier to hide and to find out too much. It also taught me to trust my gut, because even when the warning signs are subtle, they're always there. I just had to learn to recognize them before it was too late. Tinder isn't a place to trust, and the nice people you do meet are never worth dealing with the bad. Okay, so listen to this. It happened to me a few months back, and I still get chills thinking about it. I'd been on Tinder for ages, off and on, just looking for something. A distraction, maybe. A decent conversation. I wasn't really putting any pressure on it. I had a decent job, a good group of friends, and wasn't actively looking to be tied down. Anyway, I matched with this guy named Alex. Standardly attractive, Good teeth, nice eyes, hiking pictures. His profile was pretty generic. Loved travel, hated drama, all that jazz. Nothing that screamed run away. Which, honestly, is a victory on Tinder. We started chatting, and he was actually engaging. He wasn't just sending one-word replies or asking for nudes 5 minutes in. He asked about my job, my hobbies. Actually listened when I talked about my weird obsession with true crime podcasts. We had a lot in common, or so it seemed. He was quick-witted, funny, and had this way of making me feel like I'd known him forever. After a few days of nonstop texting, we decided to meet up. He suggested this new Italian place downtown, which I'd been wanting to try. I figured, what the hell? I told my roommate where I was going, sent her a screenshot of his profile. The usual safety precautions. The date started off great. He was even more attractive in person, and the conversation flowed easily. We talked about everything, our families, our travel dreams, our favorite movies. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, which was refreshing. He even laughed at my terrible jokes. I was actually starting to think, okay, maybe this is going somewhere. But then, things started to get weird. It started subtly. He kept steering the conversation back to my apartment. Not in a creepy, I want to come over kind of way, but more like, so you live alone, right? What floor are you on? Is it a safe building? I brushed it off at first, figured he was just trying to be considerate. Then he started asking about my schedule. What time I usually left for work, what time I got home, if I had any roommates or pets. Again, I tried to play it cool, but I was starting to feel a little uneasy. The biggest red flag was when he started talking about my social media. He mentioned a photo I posted on Instagram from a hiking trip a few weeks ago. No big deal, right? Except he described the exact location, the exact time the photo was taken, and even the people who were in the background. I hadn't tagged any of that information in the post. How did he know? I started to panic. I made some excuse about having an early morning and said I needed to head home. He seemed disappointed but didn't push it. He walked me to my car, and that's when I noticed it. He was driving the same make and model as my car, the same color even. I thought it was a weird coincidence, but then he reached into his car and pulled out a small, framed picture of me. It was a picture I had on my dresser, but had never shown him. How did he get into my apartment? I'm not kidding, my blood ran cold. I mumbled a quick goodbye and practically dove into my car, locking the doors as fast as I could. I peeled out of the parking lot, my hands shaking so badly I could barely see straight. I didn't go home that night. I drove straight to my best friend's place and crashed on her couch. I told her everything that had happened, and she was just as freaked out as I was. We spent the rest of the night Googling Alex's name, trying to find anything about him. But there was nothing. No social media profiles, no public records, nothing. It was like he didn't exist. The next morning, I went to the police. I told them everything, showed them his Tinder profile, described his car. They took my statement, but they didn't seem to take it very seriously. They said it was probably just a harmless stalker and that they couldn't do anything until he actually did something. That wasn't comforting. I changed my locks that day, installed a security system, and basically turned my apartment into Fort Knox. I was terrified. I didn't leave my apartment for a week. I ordered everything online and had my friends bring me groceries. After a week had passed and nothing happened, I started to feel a little bit better. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he was just a weirdo with a crush. Maybe he'd gotten into my apartment when the maintenance people had come. Then, one night, I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, when I heard a noise outside my window. It was a faint scratching sound, like someone was tapping on the glass. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I slowly got out of bed and peeked through the blinds. There he was, Alex, standing in my backyard, staring up at my window. He was holding a small rock in his hand, using it to tap on the glass. He was smiling. I screamed and ran to the phone, dialing 911. He didn't run. He just stood there, smiling, as I screamed into the phone. By the time the police arrived, he was gone. They searched the area, but they couldn't find him. That was the last time I saw him. But the fear hasn't gone away. I still have nightmares about him standing outside my window, smiling. I still jump at every little noise. I deactivated my Tinder account and deleted all my dating apps. I don't think I'll ever use them again. The police eventually found his car abandoned a few states away. There was no sign of him. They consider him a person of interest, but they haven't been able to track him down. He's just vanished. I think about him all the time. He's out there, and I don't know when, if ever, he'll stop. I moved again, changed my name, and tried to start over. But it's hard to shake the feeling that he's still out there, watching me. I look over my shoulder everywhere I go. I don't trust anyone. I know this sounds like something out of a movie, but it's real. It happened to me. And it's a reminder that you never really know who you're talking to online. Be careful who you trust. Be careful who you meet. Because sometimes, the person on the other side of the screen is not who they seem. It's a good reminder to trust your gut and to never ignore red flags, no matter how charming someone may seem. The picture of me haunts me to this day, and I'm still in therapy trying to cope. I will never use a dating app again, and the thought of going on a date terrifies me. Also, always let your friends know exactly where you are and who you're with when meeting someone from an online dating app. Check in with them so they know you're safe. It's better to be safe than sorry, and the alternative could be devastating. Please stay safe out there and be aware of the dangers of online dating. I don't want anyone to have to go through what I went through. Online dating is not what it seems, and the amount of dangerous people are terrifying. I wish I could forget what happened that day. It was supposed to be a normal Saturday, the kind where you laze around in your pajamas until noon, binge watch some trash TV, and maybe, just maybe, venture outside for a late lunch. But I made the mistake of opening Tinder, and that simple swipe changed everything. I'd been on Tinder for a while, mostly out of boredom. I wasn't really looking for anything serious, just a distraction from the monotony of my post-grad life. I'd had a few decent dates, a couple of awkward encounters, and a whole lot of nothing. But then I matched with him. His name was Alex, and his profile was intriguing. He had this dark, brooding look, like a tortured artist or a misunderstood poet. His bio was short and cryptic, looking for someone who understands the shadows. I know, it sounds ridiculous now, but at the time, I was drawn in. I was always a sucker for the mysterious type. We started chatting, and he was surprisingly articulate and intelligent. He talked about philosophy, art, and the darker aspects of human nature. He seemed to see the world in a way that was both unsettling and captivating. I found myself opening up to him in a way I hadn't with anyone else on the app. We talked for hours, late into the night, and I started to feel like I was connecting with someone on a deeper level. After a week of intense messaging, he suggested we meet up. I hesitated. There was something about him that made me uneasy, a sense of darkness that I couldn't quite shake. But I was also curious, maybe even a little bit excited. I told myself it was just a date, nothing to be afraid of. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop in a part of town I didn't know very well, a place he said was off the beaten path. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting at a table in the corner. He looked different in person, less polished than in his photos. His eyes were intense, almost unsettlingly so, and he had a nervous energy that made me feel on edge. We ordered our drinks and started talking. At first, the conversation was normal, even pleasant. He asked about my job, my hobbies, my family. But then the topics started to shift. He began talking about his fascination with true crime, his interest in cults, and his belief that the world was a fundamentally evil place. I tried to steer the conversation in a lighter direction, but he kept bringing it back to the darkness. He spoke with a strange intensity, his eyes burning into mine. I started to feel increasingly uncomfortable, like I was trapped in a nightmare. After an hour, I told him I had to leave. I made some excuse about having an early morning appointment. He didn't argue, but his expression was strange. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. As I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I glanced back, and he was still sitting at the table, staring at me. His smile had widened, and it looked predatory. I hurried to my car and drove away as quickly as I could. When I got home, I immediately blocked him on Tinder and tried to forget about the whole thing. But the unease lingered. The next day, I started receiving strange messages on my phone. They were anonymous, and they contained personal information about me. Things I had never told anyone. Things only someone who knew me well would know. It was clear that Alex was behind them. I changed my phone number and deleted all my social media accounts. I felt like I was being stalked, like I was living in a horror movie. I was terrified. A few days later, I came home to find my apartment door ajar. My heart leaped into my throat. I cautiously pushed the door open and stepped inside. The apartment was a mess. Furniture was overturned, drawers were pulled out, and clothes were scattered everywhere. It looked like someone had ransacked the place. I slowly made my way through the apartment, calling out my name. There was no response. I was alone. Then I saw it. Scrawled on the wall in what looked like blood were the words, "I know everything about you." I screamed. I ran out of the apartment and didn't stop running until I reached the police station. I told them everything about Alex, the messages, the break-in. They took my statement and promised to investigate, but they said there was little they could do without more evidence. I never went back to that apartment. I moved in with my parents and tried to rebuild my life, but the fear never went away. I was always looking over my shoulder, wondering if Alex was still out there, watching me. A few weeks later, I saw a news report about a series of murders in a nearby town. The victims were all young women, and the police suspected a serial killer was responsible. As they described the suspect, I felt a chill run down my spine. It was Alex. They eventually caught him, and he confessed to the murders. He was a psychopath, a monster who preyed on vulnerable women he met online. I was lucky. I had escaped, but others weren't so fortunate. I still think about them, about the lives that were cut short because of a swipe on Tinder. I deleted the app and vowed never to use it again. The experience had scarred me, leaving me with a deep distrust of people and a constant fear that the darkness was always lurking just beneath the surface. I wish I could forget what happened that day, but I know I never will. It's a reminder of the dangers that exist in the world, even in the seemingly harmless corners of the internet. I always carry pepper spray with me now. I am always sure to lock my doors. Now I work with organizations to help stop online dating violence, and I warn people of the dangers. Now I still think about her, even if I don't know her name. I hope the man never finds her again. It all started with a swipe, doesn't it always? I was fresh out of a messy breakup, the kind where you question everything you thought you knew about love and yourself. My best friend, Sarah, convinced me that Tinder was the answer, a way to get back out there, and prove that not all guys were emotionally stunted man-children. I reluctantly agreed, created a profile with a few carefully curated photos, filtered of course, and dove into the digital dating pool. The first few weeks were a blur of awkward small talk and cringeworthy pickup lines. I met a guy who talked incessantly about his cryptocurrency investments, another who brought his mom on our date. Apparently, she needed to approve, and one who tried to convince me that the earth was flat. It was exhausting, and I was starting to think Sarah was wrong. Maybe I was destined to be a cat lady after all. Then I matched with Liam. His profile was different from the others. He wasn't posing shirtless in a gym mirror or holding up a dead fish. Instead, there were pictures of him hiking in the mountains, volunteering at an animal shelter, and playing guitar at what looked like an open mic night. His bio was simple and self-deprecating. Just a guy trying to find someone to share my love of bad puns and even worse dad jokes. I swiped right without hesitation. We started chatting, and I was immediately drawn to his wit and intelligence. He wasn't afraid to be vulnerable, sharing his fears and insecurities with a refreshing honesty I hadn't encountered on Tinder before. We talked for hours about everything and nothing, our conversations flowing effortlessly from books and movies to our childhood dreams and deepest regrets. He even made me laugh, which was a feat considering my generally cynical mood. After a week of constant messaging, we decided to meet up for coffee. I was nervous, of course, but also genuinely excited. He seemed too good to be true, and a small voice in the back of my head kept whispering, "This is probably a catfish." But I pushed the doubt aside, telling myself to be open-minded and give him a chance. When I saw him waiting outside the coffee shop, I was relieved. He looked exactly like his pictures, maybe even better in person. He had kind eyes, a warm smile, and a slightly awkward charm that I found endearing. We hugged hello, and I felt a strange sense of comfort, like I had known him for years. The date went perfectly. We talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories. He listened intently when I spoke, making me feel seen and heard in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. He even remembered the smallest details I had mentioned in our previous conversations. It was like he was genuinely interested in getting to know me, not just trying to impress me. As the date came to an end, he walked me back to my car. He leaned in for a kiss, and I didn't hesitate. It was soft, sweet, and surprisingly electric. I drove home with a goofy smile on my face, feeling like I was floating on a cloud. We started seeing each other regularly after that. We went on hikes, saw movies, and cooked dinner at each other's apartments. He met my friends, and they all loved him. He was charming, funny, and always willing to lend a helping hand. He seemed perfect, but as time went on, I started noticing little things that made me uneasy. He was incredibly possessive of his phone, always keeping it face down and never letting me see what he was doing. He would often disappear for hours without explanation, only to return with vague excuses about running errands or visiting family. And he had a strange habit of asking me the same questions over and over again, as if he was trying to catch me in a lie. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. After all, I had been hurt before, and maybe I was just projecting my past experiences onto him. But the feeling of unease persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. My gut was screaming at me that something was wrong, but I ignored it, blinded by my desire to believe that I had finally found someone who cared about me. One night, I was at his apartment, waiting for him to come back from running errands. I was bored, so I decided to watch a movie. I couldn't find a remote, so I started searching through his drawers. That's when I found it. Hidden beneath a pile of clothes was a small, locked box. Curiosity getting the best of me, I tried to open it, but it was no use. I rummaged through the drawer again, hoping to find a key. And that's when I saw it, a photo of Liam with another woman. They were standing close together, smiling and holding hands. The photo looked old, like it had been taken years ago. But there was no mistaking it. It was Liam. And the woman was definitely not me. My heart sank. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. All the red flags I had ignored, all the excuses I had dismissed, suddenly came crashing down on me. He wasn't who he said he was. He was hiding something. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to confront him, but I was scared. What if he got angry? What if he tried to hurt me? I decided to leave, to get out of his apartment as quickly as possible. As I was walking out the door, I heard him coming up the stairs. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. He saw me, and his face went pale. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice strained. "I was just leaving," I said, trying to sound casual. "Did you find something?" he asked, his eyes narrowing. I didn't say anything. I just turned and ran. I ran all the way back to my apartment, my mind racing. I didn't know what to do, who to trust. I felt like my whole world had been turned upside down. The next day, I went to the police. I told them everything, about Liam, about the box, about the photo. They took my statement and promised to investigate. A few days later, they called me back. They had searched Liam's apartment and found the box. Inside, there were more photos of him with different women, along with their names, addresses, and phone numbers. They also found a journal filled with disturbing entries about his desire to control and manipulate women. The police told me that Liam was a con artist, a master manipulator who preyed on vulnerable women looking for love. He would build relationships with them, gain their trust, and then slowly isolate them from their friends and family. He would then use them for their money, their resources, or whatever else he could get his hands on. I was devastated. I had been so blind, so foolish. I had ignored my gut instincts and allowed myself to be manipulated by a dangerous man. It took me a long time to recover from that experience. I went to therapy, cut off all contact with Liam, and focused on rebuilding my life. I learned to trust my instincts, to listen to that small voice in the back of my head that warns me when something is wrong. And I learned that sometimes, the people who seem too good to be true often are, especially on Tinder. Now I take things very slowly, and if I have any gut feelings, I do not hesitate to get out of there. I learned a valuable lesson that day about trusting my gut, a lesson etched in my memory with the sharpness of a shattered phone screen and the lingering scent of cheap cologne. It all started, predictably, with a swipe. I was fresh out of a bad breakup, convinced I needed to get back out there, and Tinder seemed like the least intimidating option. I wasn't looking for love, just a distraction, a face-to-face conversation that wasn't with my cat. His profile was intriguing. Liam. Dark, brooding photos, mostly in black and white. A bio that read, "Looking for someone to explore the hidden corners of the city with." Artsy, mysterious, a little bit cliché. But hey, I was in a cliché-embracing mood. We matched, and the conversation flowed easily. He wasn't overly aggressive or pushy, just genuinely curious about my interests and sharing his own. He claimed to be a photographer, specializing in urban landscapes. He sent me some of his work. Photos of graffiti-covered alleyways and abandoned buildings bathed in the eerie glow of streetlights. I was impressed. He was either a legitimate artist or a master manipulator with a good eye for aesthetics. After a week of chatting, we decided to meet. He suggested a secret speakeasy he knew about, a place supposedly hidden behind an unmarked door in an old bookstore. Again cliché, but I was hooked. I'd been to some bars, and this one was something new. The directions he gave me were vague, almost like a treasure hunt. Go to the bookstore on Elm Street. Look for the shelf with the worn-out copy of Moby Dick. Push it. You'll know. I should have seen the red flags waving, but I was too caught up in the idea of a cool, underground adventure. The bookstore was exactly as he described, dusty, dimly lit, and overflowing with literary relics. I found the Moby Dick shelf, gave it a push, and sure enough, it swung inward, revealing a narrow, dimly lit hallway. The air instantly changed, thick with the smell of old wood and something else, something vaguely metallic. I hesitated for a moment, a flicker of doubt creeping into my mind. But I'd come this far. I took a deep breath and stepped into the darkness. The hallway opened into a small, dimly lit bar, filled with mismatched furniture and the murmur of hushed conversations. The atmosphere was definitely unique, a strange mix of bohemian and vaguely unsettling. I spotted Liam sitting at a corner table, a small, knowing smile on his face. He was even more attractive in person, with sharp features and intense, dark eyes that seemed to see right through me. We greeted each other, and he ordered me a drink, something strong and vaguely fruity. The conversation was easy, just like online. He talked about his photography, his travels, his love for obscure art and music. I found myself drawn in by his charm and his seeming genuine interest in my life. But as the night wore on, things started to get off. He kept steering the conversation towards darker topics, urban legends, true crime stories, unsolved mysteries. He told me about a series of disappearances that had plagued the city years ago. Young women who had vanished without a trace, their cases never solved. He spoke about it with a strange fascination, a glint in his eyes that made me uneasy. I tried to change the subject, but he kept bringing it back, like he was trying to gauge my reaction. Then, he started asking me personal questions, probing questions about my routine, my living situation, my security habits. Did I live alone? Did I have a security system? Did I tell anyone where I was going tonight? Again, red flags waving frantically, but I was too polite, too caught up in the moment to shut him down. I gave vague answers, trying to deflect his questions, but he was persistent. He was like a fisherman reeling me in, slowly but surely. The final straw came when he suggested we leave. "I want to show you something," he said, his voice low and husky. "A secret spot I found, the perfect place to take some photos." He didn't specify where, just that it was nearby and that I would love it. That's when my gut screamed. Every instinct I had was telling me to run, to get away from this man as fast as possible. I made an excuse, something about having an early meeting, and said I needed to get home. He didn't argue. but his smile faded, replaced by a cold, calculating look that sent a shiver down my spine. He walked me to the entrance of the bar, back through the hidden passage, and out into the street. As I walked away, I could feel his eyes on me, burning into my back. I didn't breathe easy until I was safely inside my apartment, doors locked, windows closed. I immediately blocked Liam on Tinder and every other social media platform I could think of. I spent the rest of the night researching him, scouring the internet for any information I could find. I found nothing. No photography website, no social media profiles, no trace of his existence beyond his Tinder profile. It was like he was a ghost. The next day, I went to the police. I told them everything about the strange conversation, the probing questions, the unsettling vibe I got from him. They took my statement, but they didn't seem overly concerned. They said it sounded like a bad date, not a crime. Without any concrete evidence, there was nothing they could do. Frustrated and terrified, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I went back to the bookstore on Elm Street. I wanted to see if I could find any clues, any trace of Liam or the secret speakeasy. The owner, a kind-looking old man with a long white beard, remembered me from the night before. I asked him about the hidden passage, about the speakeasy behind the bookshelf. He looked at me with confusion. He said he had no idea what I was talking about. There was no hidden passage, no speakeasy, no secret bar. I insisted, telling him about pushing the bookshelf, about the dimly lit hallway. He shook his head, his eyes filled with concern. He suggested I might have been mistaken, or perhaps had too much to drink. I left the bookstore feeling even more confused and unnerved than before. Had I imagined the whole thing? Was I just paranoid, projecting my fears onto a harmless stranger? But I knew what I had seen. I knew what I had felt. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. I spent the next few weeks living in a state of heightened anxiety, constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid that Liam would reappear. I changed my routine, avoided going out alone at night, and installed a security system in my apartment. I was a prisoner in my own home, haunted by the memory of that night. Then one day, I saw something that made my blood run cold. I was scrolling through a local news website when I saw a headline that stopped me in my tracks. Missing woman found dead in abandoned warehouse. The article described the discovery of a young woman's body in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The woman had been missing for several weeks, her disappearance widely publicized. As I read the article, I noticed a detail that made my stomach churn. The warehouse was located in the same area that Liam had mentioned wanting to take me to for his secret photo shoot. I clicked on the photo accompanying the article, a grainy image of the warehouse exterior, and that's when I saw it, a small detail in the background that confirmed my worst fears. A graffiti tag on the wall, a symbol that I had seen in one of Liam's photographs, the same symbol he claimed was his signature. I knew then that Liam wasn't just a harmless weirdo. He was a predator, a monster hiding behind a charming facade, and I had almost become his next victim. I went back to the police, armed with this new information. This time, they took me seriously. They launched a full-scale investigation, focusing on Liam as the prime suspect. They tracked down his IP address from his Tinder profile, traced his phone calls, and searched his last known address. But they found nothing. Liam had vanished without a trace. He was a ghost, a phantom, a figment of my imagination brought to life by the dark corners of the internet. To this day, he remains at large, a reminder of the dangers that lurk in the shadows of the digital world. I still use Tinder, but I'm much more cautious now. I do a reverse image search on every profile. I video chat before meeting in person, and I always tell a friend where I'm going and who I'm meeting. I learned a valuable lesson that day, that appearances can be deceiving, that danger can hide behind a charming smile, and that sometimes the best way to stay safe is to trust your gut, no matter how irrational it may seem. If it hadn't been for that nagging feeling, that instinctual fear, I might not be here to tell this story. The internet makes it easy to pretend, and it's harder than ever to know who anyone is on the other side of that screen. Looking back, the bio should have been a screaming siren, looking for someone real. No flakes. Must be open to new experiences. Drama queens need not apply. It's the kind of vague, cliché garbage every other guy on Tinder slaps on their profile. But for some reason, Mark's felt different, more pointed, like a challenge. I was bored, swiping through the same parade of gym selfies and dead fish photos, so maybe that's why I swiped right. Or maybe it was the picture. It was just a close-up of his eyes, intense and blue, staring right into the camera. It felt invasive and intriguing all at once. We matched instantly, and he messaged me within minutes. Finally, someone who looks like they can handle a little adventure. Again, cliché, but I bit. I was in my early 20s, craving something more than my predictable routine of work, Netflix, and the occasional awkward bar night with friends. So I played along. Depends on what you mean by adventure. I typed back, adding a winking emoji. His responses were fast and frequent, almost too much. He wanted to know everything about me. My hopes, my fears, my dreams. He love-bombed me with compliments, telling me I was beautiful, intelligent, unlike anyone he'd ever met. He built me up, making me feel special and seen. It was intoxicating, especially coming from someone who seemed so guarded. He wouldn't tell me much about himself. Vague allusions to a complicated past, a demanding job, and a need for freedom. More red flags, waving furiously, but I ignored them. I was too caught up in the whirlwind. After a week of intense texting, he suggested we meet. He didn't suggest a coffee shop or a bar. He proposed a weekend getaway. "I know this amazing cabin in the woods," he wrote. "No cell service, no distractions. Just us, getting to know each other." My rational brain screamed no. This was insane. This was a horror movie waiting to happen. But the adventurous, thrill-seeking part of me, the part that was tired of being safe and predictable, whispered yes. I told my roommate I was going camping with friends. A lie, of course. I packed a bag, trying to convince myself that I wasn't being completely reckless. I told myself I could handle it. I could always leave if things got weird. Famous last words. The drive to the cabin was long and winding, deeper and deeper into the woods. The cell service vanished miles before we arrived. The cabin itself was even more isolated than I imagined. Rustic, to put it kindly. Dilapidated, to be more accurate. It was dark and musty inside, with a strange, unsettling smell that I couldn't quite place. Mark brushed off my concerns, telling me it was part of the charm. The first night was intense. He was incredibly attentive, showering me with compliments and affection. He cooked dinner, a surprisingly elaborate meal for a cabin in the woods, and we drank wine by the fire. He talked about his love of nature, his desire for a simple life, his belief in soulmates. He was a master manipulator, saying all the right things, playing on my vulnerabilities. But there were cracks in the facade, moments where his eyes would go cold, his smile would falter, and the darkness would flicker beneath the surface. He'd stare at me for too long, his gaze intense and unsettling. He'd ask probing questions about my past, my relationships, my insecurities. And he always seemed to be watching me, even when he wasn't looking directly at me. The second day was when things started to unravel. I woke up to find him gone. No note, no explanation. Just an empty bed. I wandered around the cabin, calling his name, but there was no answer. Panic started to set in. I was alone, miles from civilization, with no cell service. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he went for a hike. Maybe he went to get supplies. But something felt wrong. Terribly wrong. I decided to explore the woods around the cabin, hoping to find him. As I walked deeper into the trees, I stumbled upon a clearing. And in the center of the clearing, I saw it. A makeshift altar, constructed from branches and stones. And on the altar, a collection of disturbing objects. Bones, feathers, dried flowers, and photographs. My blood ran cold. I recognized the photographs immediately. They were pictures of me. Pictures taken without my knowledge. Pictures from my social media. Pictures from my apartment window. Pictures from the bar I frequented. He had been stalking me. I turned to run, but it was too late. He was standing behind me, a sinister smile on his face. "I was wondering when you'd find my little sanctuary," he said, his voice low and menacing. "I wanted to show you how special you are to me." He lunged at me, and I screamed. I fought back with everything I had, kicking and scratching and clawing. I managed to break free and run, stumbling through the trees, desperately trying to escape. He chased after me, his laughter echoing through the woods. I ran for what felt like hours, adrenaline pumping through my veins. I finally reached the main road, collapsing in exhaustion and fear. A passing car stopped to help, and I poured out my story to the stunned driver. He called the police, and they arrived within what felt like an eternity. They searched the woods for Mark, but he was gone, vanished without a trace. They found the cabin, the altar, the photographs. They confirmed that he had been stalking me for weeks, possibly months. They told me I was lucky to be alive. The aftermath was a blur of police interviews, therapy sessions, and sleepless nights. I moved back home with my parents, terrified to be alone. I deleted all my social media accounts, changed my phone number, and became a recluse. The world felt dangerous and unpredictable. It's been years since that weekend, and I'm still haunted by it. I still have nightmares about the cabin, the altar, and Mark's chilling smile. I'm still afraid of the dark. Looking back, all the red flags were there. The intense messaging, the vague backstory, the isolated location, the probing questions. I ignored them all, blinded by my desire for adventure and my own naivete. Tinder became a symbol of my own stupidity. I had swiped right on my own personal nightmare. I learned a harsh lesson about the dangers of online dating and the importance of trusting my gut. I still struggle with trust issues. I'm wary of new people, hesitant to let anyone get too close. I'm constantly on guard, always looking for the red flags. Maybe someday I'll be able to move on, to heal completely. But for now, I'm still living with the consequences of that fateful swipe. The consequences of ignoring the red flags and venturing into the woods with a stranger I met on Tinder. A stranger who turned out to be a monster. And it all started with a seemingly harmless profile and a picture of intense blue eyes. Eyes that now haunt my dreams. I wish someone had warned me about the quiet ones on Tinder. You know, the guys with the minimal profiles. The ones who don't flood you with cheesy pickup lines or aggressively sexual messages. The ones who seem normal, reasonable, human. Those are the ones you really have to watch out for. My mistake was thinking that normal equaled safe. It all started, like most of these stories do, with a swipe. His name was Mark. His profile picture was just him smiling in a park, nothing fancy. His bio was short and sweet. Looking for interesting conversations and maybe more. Let's grab a coffee. Compared to the parade of shirtless gym selfies and guys who opened with "Hey, winky face," Mark seemed like a breath of fresh air. We matched, and he messaged me almost immediately. He wasn't overly complimentary, just a simple, "Hey, how's your day going?" It was nice. After a few days of chatting, we discovered we had a lot in common. We both loved indie movies, hated reality TV, and had a morbid fascination with true crime podcasts. The conversation flowed easily, and he seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. He was a little vague about his job, only saying he worked in tech. I didn't push it. I figured everyone was entitled to some privacy. He didn't ask invasive questions about my personal life either, which was another point in his favor. After about a week of texting, he suggested we meet up. We decided on a coffee shop near my apartment. He looked exactly like his picture, maybe a little taller. He was dressed casually, in jeans and a t-shirt. He was polite, attentive, and even a little shy. The coffee date went perfectly. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. He even made me laugh a few times, which is rare. At the end of the date, he walked me back to my apartment and gave me a chaste kiss on the cheek. "I had a really great time," he said. "Let's do this again soon." I was smitten. I texted my best friend Sarah immediately. "I think I finally found a normal guy." She was cautiously optimistic, reminding me that it was only one date and I shouldn't get my hopes up. But I couldn't help it. Mark seemed too good to be true. We went out again a few days later, this time to a small Italian restaurant. He was just as charming as before. He listened intently when I talked, asked thoughtful questions, and even remembered details from our previous conversations. He paid for dinner, walked me home, and kissed me goodnight. A proper kiss this time. It was perfect. Things progressed quickly after that. We started spending almost every night together. He'd come over after work. We'd order takeout, watch movies, and just talk. It felt comfortable and easy, like we'd known each other for years. He never pressured me for anything, which I appreciated. He was just there. That's when the little things started. Small things, almost imperceptible at first, that I chalked up to coincidence or my own paranoia. Like the time I swore I saw him driving past my apartment building when I was out walking my dog, even though he lived on the other side of town. Or the time he mentioned a conversation I had with Sarah that I was certain I'd never told him about. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was being ridiculous. But the feeling of unease grew stronger with each passing day. He started asking more questions about my routine, about my friends, about my family. He wanted to know everything, and he seemed disappointed when I couldn't provide him with enough details. He started showing up at places I hadn't told him I'd be. Once, I went to a yoga class with Sarah, and he was there, in the back, pretending to stretch. He said he just happened to be in the neighborhood and thought he'd drop in, but I knew he was lying. Another time, I went to a concert with my sister, and I saw him standing in the crowd, watching me. He didn't acknowledge me, just stood there motionless, like a statue. I started avoiding him, making excuses not to see him, but he wouldn't take the hint. He'd call and text constantly, asking why I was being distant, accusing me of losing interest. His messages became increasingly desperate and clingy. One night, I came home from work to find him waiting outside my apartment building. He looked agitated, his eyes bloodshot. "We need to talk," he said, grabbing my arm. I tried to pull away, but he held on tight. "Mark, you're hurting me," I said, my voice trembling. "I just want to know why you're pushing me away," he said, his grip tightening. "I thought we had something special." "We do, Mark, but you're scaring me," I said. "You're being too intense. I need some space." He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and hurt. Then, he suddenly released my arm and took a step back. I just really like you," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I know, Mark, but this isn't healthy," I said. "We need to take a break." He nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on mine. "Okay," he said. "Okay, I'll give you some space. But I'll be waiting." I went inside, locked the door, and didn't come out for the rest of the night. I called Sarah and told her everything. She was terrified. She urged me to go to the police, but I hesitated. I didn't have any proof, just a bunch of unsettling incidents. The next morning, I woke up to a text message from Mark. It was a picture of me sleeping in my bed. My blood ran cold. I hadn't given him a key to my apartment. How did he get in? I called the police immediately. They came and took a report, but they said there wasn't much they could do without more evidence. They advised me to get a restraining order, which I did. For a few weeks, things were quiet. I didn't see or hear from Mark. I started to relax, thinking maybe he'd finally gotten the message. But then, one night, I woke up to find him standing in my bedroom. He was just standing there, in the dark, watching me. He didn't say a word. I screamed, and he lunged at me. We struggled for what felt like an eternity. I managed to break free and run out of the apartment, screaming for help. The police arrived quickly and arrested him. He was charged with stalking, harassment, and breaking and entering. He's in jail now, awaiting trial. I still don't know how he got into my apartment that night. I changed the locks, installed a security system, and moved to a new city. But I still look over my shoulder, wondering if he's out there, watching me. I wish someone had warned me about the quiet ones on Tinder, the ones who seem normal, reasonable, human. Because sometimes, the most dangerous monsters are the ones who hide in plain sight. Sometimes you think you know who you have matched with, but you never know who is behind the screen. Be careful with who you choose to spend time with. Trust your gut. If something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. Okay, so this is really hard for me to even think about, let alone talk about. I've never told anyone this before. Not my therapist, not my best friend, nobody. It's been locked away in the darkest corner of my brain for years, and honestly, I'm not even sure why I'm typing it out now. Maybe it's because I saw a stupid commercial for Tinder, and it just unlocked something. It was back in college, my junior year. I was single, lonely, and, let's be honest, pretty desperate for some kind of connection. Tinder was relatively new back then, still kind of exciting, and everyone was using it. I wasn't expecting to find the love of my life or anything, just maybe someone to grab coffee with, or, something more. I matched with this guy named Caleb. He was different from the other guys I'd matched with. He wasn't conventionally attractive, kind of lanky, with a mop of brown hair and these intense, almost piercing blue eyes. But there was something about him that drew me in. He seemed intelligent, introspective. His profile said he was studying philosophy and loved hiking. We started messaging, and the conversations were surprisingly deep. We talked about everything, our fears, our dreams, our favorite books. It felt like I was actually connecting with someone on a level I hadn't experienced before. After a week or so of messaging, we decided to meet up. He suggested a hike in a nearby state park. I was a little hesitant, Meeting someone you've only talked to online in a secluded area felt risky, but he seemed so genuine, and I really wanted to meet him. So I agreed. I told a few friends where I was going and who I was meeting, just in case. The day of the hike, I was nervous but also excited. Caleb was waiting for me at the trailhead. He looked just like his pictures, maybe even a little more intense in person. His eyes seemed to bore right through me. We started hiking, and the conversation flowed easily. He was funny, insightful, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. The hike itself was beautiful. The scenery was breathtaking. For a while, I forgot all my anxieties and just enjoyed being in the moment. But as we got further into the woods, something started to shift. Caleb's demeanor changed. He became quieter, more withdrawn. He started staring off into the distance, like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. I asked him if he was okay, but he just brushed it off, saying he was fine. We reached a clearing with a small waterfall, and Caleb suggested we take a break. We sat down on a rock, and for a few minutes, we just sat in silence, listening to the sound of the water. Then Caleb turned to me, and his eyes were different. They were colder, harder, almost devoid of emotion. He started talking about nature, about how brutal and unforgiving it could be. He talked about the cycle of life and death, about how everything was connected. It was all very philosophical, but there was something unsettling about the way he was saying it, like he was trying to convince himself of something. Then he reached into his backpack and pulled out a knife. Not a small pocket knife, but a large hunting knife with a serrated blade. My heart leaped into my throat. I tried to stay calm, telling myself that maybe he was just planning on using it to cut some fruit or something. But then he started talking about sacrifice. He said that sometimes, in order to achieve true enlightenment, one had to make sacrifices. He looked right at me when he said it, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I was the sacrifice he had in mind. I tried to get up and run, but he grabbed my arm. His grip was surprisingly strong. He started rambling about how he had been chosen, how he had a destiny to fulfill, how I was the key to unlocking some higher level of consciousness. It was complete and utter madness. I struggled against him, screaming for help, but we were so far into the woods that nobody could hear me. He wrestled me to the ground and held the knife to my throat. I closed my eyes, bracing for the end. But then, something unexpected happened. A group of hikers came around the bend. They saw what was happening and started yelling. Caleb froze, his eyes wide with panic. He dropped the knife and ran off into the woods. The hikers helped me up and called the police. I was in shock, barely able to speak. They took me to the hospital, where I was treated for minor injuries and questioned by the police. They searched for Caleb, but they never found him. He disappeared without a trace. The police told me that he had a history of mental illness and had been off his medication for some time. They said that he had been using Tinder to lure women into the woods, but I was the first one he had actually attacked. After that, I dropped out of college. I couldn't function. I had nightmares every night, flashbacks during the day. I was terrified to leave my house. It took years of therapy to even begin to process what had happened. I still have the scar on my arm from where he grabbed me. It's a constant reminder of that day, of how close I came to dying. I haven't used Tinder since, and I don't think I ever will. The thought of meeting someone online again fills me with dread. I know it sounds crazy, like something out of a horror movie, but it's real. It happened to me, and I've been carrying that secret with me ever since. I don't know why I'm telling you this now, but I needed to get it off my chest. It's been weighing me down for too long. I just hope that by sharing my story, I can help someone else avoid a similar fate. Be careful who you meet online. You never really know who they are. Trust your gut, and don't be afraid to walk away if something feels wrong, because sometimes the person on the other side of the screen is not who they appear to be, and sometimes they're hiding a darkness that could destroy you. This whole experience was so intense, it led to me never being able to trust the people I meet online. Tinder is scary. Okay, here it goes. I haven't told anyone this, not even my therapist, honestly. It feels too out there, too unbelievable, even to me, and I lived it. This happened a few years ago, back when I was freshly divorced and trying to navigate the whole online dating thing. Tinder was the app du jour, so naturally, that's where I landed. Swiping left and right, the usual deal. Most of the profiles were forgettable gym selfies, group shots where you couldn't tell who was who, bios that said, "Just ask." But then I saw Liam. He wasn't conventionally handsome, kind of lanky, with messy dark hair that always seemed to be falling into his eyes. His pictures weren't polished or staged. They looked like candid shots taken by a friend, him laughing at a concert, hiking in the woods, reading a book in a coffee shop. There was something genuine about him that cut through the noise of all the other profiles. His bio was simple, looking for someone to explore the weird corners of the world with. Intrigued, I swiped right. We matched almost instantly. Our conversation started off normal enough. We talked about our jobs, our hobbies, our favorite movies. He was a writer, working on some kind of fantasy novel. I was a graphic designer, stuck in a corporate job that was slowly sucking the life out of me. We bonded over our shared love of old books, obscure music, and long walks in nature. After a week or so of chatting, we decided to meet up. He suggested this little hole-in-the-wall bookstore that also had a cafe. It was exactly the kind of place I loved, quiet, filled with the smell of old paper and coffee. When I saw him, he was even more charming in person. He had this easygoing way about him that made me feel instantly comfortable. We talked for hours that night, about everything and nothing. I felt a connection with him that I hadn't felt with anyone in a long time. We started seeing each other regularly after that, going on hikes, exploring abandoned buildings, attending open mic nights. He had a way of making even the most mundane activities feel like an adventure. He was unlike anyone I had ever met before. He saw the world differently, and he opened my eyes to things I had never noticed before. He was also incredibly intense. He had a way of looking at me that made me feel like he could see right through me. He asked questions that were almost too personal, delving into my deepest fears and insecurities. It was unnerving, but also strangely exhilarating. One night, we were sitting at his apartment, drinking wine and listening to music. He lived in this old, run-down building in a part of town I didn't know very well. The apartment was cluttered but cozy, filled with books, records, and strange artifacts he had collected over the years. He started telling me about his writing. He said his novel was about a hidden world, a place that existed alongside our own, but was only accessible to those who knew the right paths. He said the characters in his book were real people, people he had met in his dreams. I laughed and told him he was crazy, but he just smiled and said, "Maybe I am." He pulled out a worn leather-bound book and began to read aloud. The words were strange, almost hypnotic. As he read, I started to feel weird, lightheaded, disoriented. The room seemed to be spinning, and the sounds of the city outside faded away. I looked around and thought I saw the shadows flickering in the corners of my eye. I told him to stop, but he just kept reading, his voice growing louder and more insistent. I covered my ears and squeezed my eyes shut, but the words kept echoing in my head. Then, everything went black. When I woke up, I was lying on his couch. The book was gone, and Liam was nowhere to be seen. I felt groggy and confused, like I had just woken up from a long, strange dream. I looked at my phone, and several hours had passed. I tried calling Liam, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I left him a message, asking him where he had gone and if he was okay. I waited for him to call back, but he never did. I went back to his apartment the next day, but he wasn't there. The door was unlocked, and the apartment was empty. It looked like he had packed up everything and left. There was no note, no explanation, nothing. I tried contacting his friends, but no one seemed to know where he had gone. It was like he had vanished into thin air. I went to the police and reported him missing, but they didn't take me seriously. They said he was probably just a runaway or a flake, and that he would turn up eventually. But he didn't. Weeks turned into months, and still no sign of Liam. I started to wonder if I had imagined the whole thing. Maybe he wasn't real. Maybe I had just been lonely and vulnerable, and I had created him in my mind. But then I found the book. A few weeks after Liam disappeared, I was cleaning out my car, and I found a small, worn leather-bound book tucked under the seat. It was the same book he had been reading from the night he disappeared. I opened it up, and the pages were filled with the same strange, hypnotic words. I didn't dare to read them aloud again. I knew that something was wrong. Something was deeply, terrifyingly wrong. I tried to find out more about the book, but I couldn't find any information about it online. It was like it didn't exist. I started to do some research on Liam. I tried to find his real name, his address, anything that could help me understand who he was and where he had gone. But it was like he had no digital footprint, no social media accounts, no online records, nothing. It was like he had never existed. The more I dug, the more I realized that Liam wasn't who he said he was. He was something else, something other. I started to have nightmares. Vivid, terrifying dreams about Liam, about the book, about the hidden world he had told me about. In my dreams, I saw things I couldn't explain, things that defied logic and reason. I saw creatures that weren't human, places that weren't on this earth. I started to believe that Liam had taken me to that world, even if only for a brief moment. And I started to fear that he would come back for me. I still have the book. I keep it locked away in a safe, hidden in the back of my closet. I don't know what it is, or what it can do, but I know that it's dangerous. I know that it holds a power that I don't understand. I still think about Liam sometimes. I wonder where he is, what he's doing. I wonder if he's still exploring the weird corners of the world, or if he's found something even stranger. And I wonder if he ever thinks about me. I haven't used Tinder since. I can't. The thought of swiping through profiles, of meeting someone new, fills me with dread. I'm afraid of finding another Liam, another gateway to a world I don't want to see. So, yeah, that's my Tinder horror story. It's not a typical one, I guess. No catfishing, no stalkers, no creepy messages. Just a book, a disappearance, and a lingering sense of unease that I can't shake. And I know that I'll never truly be able to escape that world. It's a part of me now, a dark secret that I carry with me wherever I go. And I know, with a sickening certainty, that one day, Liam will be back. All right, buckle up, because this Tinder story is one for the ages, and not in a good way. It all started, innocently enough, during my last year of college. I was stressed, overwhelmed with exams, and frankly, just bored. So naturally, I downloaded Tinder. You know, the usual swipe left, swipe right routine, looking for a distraction, maybe a fun date, nothing too serious. That's when I matched with Liam. Liam was intriguing. His profile was different from the usual gym selfies and generic adventure seeker bios. He had a few pictures of him traveling, one in Nepal, another in Iceland, and his bio talked about his interest in philosophy and obscure indie bands. He seemed intelligent, well-traveled, and, let's be honest, pretty attractive. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed easily. He wasn't pushy or overly flirtatious. He actually seemed interested in getting to know me. We talked about our favorite books, our travel dreams, and our biggest fears. He was surprisingly open and vulnerable, which, in the world of Tinder, felt like a breath of fresh air. After a week of chatting, we decided to meet up for coffee. He suggested a small, independent bookstore cafe downtown. It was exactly the kind of place I loved, cozy, quiet, with the smell of old books and freshly brewed coffee filling the air. Liam was even more charming in person. He was intelligent, witty, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. We talked for hours, and it felt like we had known each other for years. By the end of the date, I was completely smitten. We made plans to see each other again the following week. The second date was even better than the first. We went to an art gallery and then grabbed dinner at a quirky little restaurant with live music. Liam was attentive, funny, and made me feel incredibly comfortable. I was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, I had stumbled upon something special on Tinder. I know, it sounds cliché, but I couldn't help but feel like there was a real connection between us. Things progressed quickly from there. We started spending more and more time together. We went on hikes, explored hidden cafes, and even cooked dinner at each other's places. He introduced me to his friends, and I introduced him to mine. Everyone seemed to like him. He was charming, polite, and genuinely seemed to care about the people in my life. I was falling hard, and I didn't care who knew it. Then, about a month into the relationship, things started to get weird. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. Little things that I couldn't quite put my finger on. For example, he started asking me a lot of questions about my daily routine. What time I woke up, what route I took to school, who I usually hung out with. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured he was just trying to get to know me better. But the questions became more frequent and more specific, and they started to make me feel uneasy. He also started showing up unexpectedly at places I frequented. I'd be studying at the library, and he'd suddenly appear, claiming he was just in the area. Or I'd be grabbing coffee with a friend, and he'd walk in, saying he felt like surprising me. Again, at first, I brushed it off as him being thoughtful and wanted to spend time with me. But the frequency of these unexpected appearances started to feel less like coincidence and more like surveillance. One evening, I was hanging out at my friend Sarah's apartment. We were watching a movie and drinking wine, just having a typical girls' night. Around 10 p.m., I got a text from Liam. "Thinking of you. Hope you're having a good night." It was a sweet message, but something about it felt off. I hadn't told him I was at Sarah's, so how did he know I wasn't at home? I shrugged it off, attributing it to some lucky guess. But the seed of doubt had been planted. A few days later, I decided to do a little digging. I know, it's not the most mature thing to do, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I started by searching for Liam online. I Googled his name, looked him up on social media, tried to find anything that could shed some light on his past. That's when I stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold. I found an old news article about a string of disappearances in a nearby town. The article described how several young women had gone missing over the past few years, all of whom had met men online. The article included a composite sketch of a suspect, based on descriptions from witnesses. And the sketch, it looked eerily like Liam. I felt like I was going to throw up. I stared at the sketch, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Could it be possible? Could the man I was falling in love with be a dangerous predator? I knew I had to get out. I couldn't stay in the same city as him, not even for another night. I packed a bag, grabbed my keys, and ran out of my apartment. I didn't even leave a note. I drove straight to my parents' house, which was a few hours away. I didn't stop until I was safely inside their home, surrounded by the familiar comfort of my childhood. I told my parents everything. They were understandably horrified. They immediately contacted the police, who took my statement and launched an investigation. They showed them the news article, the composite sketch, everything I had found. The police took it seriously and promised to look into it. A few weeks later, I got a call from the police. They had located Liam and brought him in for questioning. They didn't have enough evidence to arrest him, but they were keeping a close eye on him. They also advised me to stay away from him and to report any suspicious activity. I never saw Liam again. I don't know if he was the man in the composite sketch or if he was involved in the disappearances, but I do know that I dodged a bullet. I learned a valuable lesson about the dangers of online dating and the importance of trusting my instincts. I still use Tinder occasionally, but I'm much more cautious now. I always do my research, meet in public places, and let my friends know where I am. This experience changed me. It made me more aware of the potential dangers lurking online and more appreciative of the safety and security I have in my life. I'm grateful that I trusted my gut and got out when I did. Who knows what might have happened if I had stayed? To this day, I get chills when I think about how close I came to becoming another statistic. So, yeah, that's my Tinder horror story. It's a reminder that not everyone online is who they seem to be, and that sometimes the most charming people are the ones you should be most wary of. Be careful out there, folks. You never know who you might be swiping right on. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but looking back, the whole thing feels like a movie I wish I could unsee. It started like any other Tinder match. You swipe, they swipe, and then you're exchanging the usual pleasantries, trying to gauge if this person is a bot, a catfish, or, a relatively normal human being. His name was Alex, and his profile was pretty standard. A couple of decent photos, a witty bio about enjoying hiking and craft beer, and a Spotify anthem that wasn't offensively bad. We chatted for a few days, and he seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. The conversations were easy, and we even shared a few laughs. So, naturally, I agreed to meet him for a drink. The bar he suggested was a bit out of the way, tucked away in a part of town I didn't frequent. But I didn't think too much of it. I chalked it up to him wanting to avoid the usual crowded spots. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting at a table in the corner. He looked like his pictures, maybe a little less polished. He was wearing a slightly worn-out flannel shirt and had this nervous energy about him that I initially found endearing. The first hour or so was fine. We talked about our jobs, our hobbies, and the usual first date stuff. He was a good listener and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. But as the night went on, things started to get a little off. He started asking me really specific questions about my apartment. Not just, do you live alone? But, what floor are you on? Do you have a balcony? What kind of security system do you have? I brushed it off as him being overly cautious or just trying to make conversation, but it still made me a little uneasy. Then, he started talking about his ex. Now, I know everyone is baggage, but this was next level. He went on and on about how she had wronged him, how she had cheated on him, and how she had ruined his life. He spoke about her with such anger and resentment that it made me genuinely uncomfortable. I tried to steer the conversation in a different direction, but he kept bringing it back to her. At one point, he excused himself to go to the bathroom. While he was gone, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. I pulled out my phone and did a quick Google search of his name. That's when I found it. An article about a restraining order filed against him by his ex-girlfriend. The details were vague, but it mentioned harassment, stalking, and threats of violence. My blood ran cold. He came back from the bathroom, and I knew I had to get out of there. I made up some excuse about having an early morning and needing to go home. He seemed disappointed, but didn't argue. He offered to walk me to my car, but I politely declined, saying I needed to make a quick phone call. As I walked to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me. I fumbled with my keys, unlocked the door, and practically dove inside. I started the engine, locked the doors, and sped out of the parking lot. I didn't breathe a sigh of relief until I was safely back in my apartment. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, replaying the evening in my head and kicking myself for ignoring the red flags. I blocked Alex on Tinder and every other social media platform I could think of. I even considered calling the police, but I didn't have any concrete evidence that he had done anything illegal. The next few days were uneventful. I didn't hear from Alex, and I started to relax a little. Maybe I had overreacted. Maybe he was just a little intense and unlucky in love. But then I started noticing things. Small things at first. A plant that had been moved on my balcony. A light that I was sure I had turned off. A strange car parked across the street from my apartment building. I tried to rationalize it all. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe I was forgetting things. But the feeling that I was being watched wouldn't go away. Then, one evening, I came home from work to find my apartment door slightly ajar. My heart leaped into my throat. I cautiously pushed the door open and stepped inside. The apartment was silent. Everything seemed to be in its place. But as I walked further in, I noticed something was off. My couch cushions were slightly askew. A picture frame was tilted on the wall. And then I saw it. A single red rose lying on my bed. I backed out of the apartment slowly, my hands shaking. I ran to my neighbor's apartment and frantically explained what had happened. He was a big, burly guy, and he immediately grabbed a baseball bat and went to check my apartment. He came back a few minutes later, shaken. He said there was no one inside, but he definitely felt like someone had been there. I called the police, and they arrived a few minutes later. They searched the apartment, dusted for fingerprints, and took a report. They told me to stay with a friend or family member for a few days and to be extra cautious. I spent the next week bouncing between friends' couches, terrified to be alone. The police investigation turned up nothing. They couldn't find any fingerprints, no sign of forced entry, and no evidence that Alex had been anywhere near my apartment. They said it was possible that I had just forgotten to lock my door or that someone had entered by mistake. But I knew better. I knew that Alex had been there. I decided to move. I broke my lease, packed my belongings, and found a new apartment in a different part of the city. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, except for my closest friend. I changed my phone number and deleted all my social media accounts. I wanted to disappear. It's been a year since then, and I haven't heard from Alex. I still get nervous when I meet someone new. I still check my locks multiple times before bed, and I still have nightmares about that red rose. I know that I'll never truly feel safe again. The experience taught me a harsh lesson about the dangers of online dating and the importance of trusting your gut. You never really know who's behind the profile, and sometimes the person you think you're getting to know is a monster in disguise. I'm not sure I will ever use Tinder again. It's ruined dating completely. I have to stay on guard all the time. I don't think I'll ever fully recover. The worst part is that I'm always looking over my shoulder. I just want to feel safe. I am always cautious,